podcast for those who suffer, which is everyone.
It's a space where we can speak honestly about what it feels like to be in desolate places without losing hope.
Welcome to In the Thicket. This week's episode is on something that we've all experienced to one degree or another: disappointment. We talk a lot about our own experiences of disappointment, as well as trusting in the Lord when it seems like things are not going according to plan, or when they don't turn out as we hoped they would or as we thought they would. And we hope that this episode is not disappointing for you. Ha ha. God bless.
Hey folks, welcome back to In the Thicket. My name is Nicole.
I'm Erin.
And I'm Rachel.
And we're so happy that you've decided to join us today. It's so funny. Like I think of this, so as you know by now, this episode is about disappointment, which reminds me of this whole podcast, which is on suffering, like whenever, and Erin and Rachel, maybe you guys have this experience, but whenever I'm talking to people and I somehow mention I have a podcast with some friends, and it's always the reaction like, oh, that's so cool. What's it about? And then I'm like, oh, well, it's about suffering. And then everyone's
disappointment.
like,
Right.
oh,
Yeah.
okay. So this is this episode today is like a classic example of that. Just
Which is kind of funny. Yeah. And it's true though, because some people actually get super pumped when you say that. Like, oh, it's on suffering. They're like, ooh, good topic. I'm like, okay.
I wonder if those are the people who end up listening, or if they're not.
That's right. Those are they're just.
I appreciate both responses. I appreciate both.
It's
of them.
fair.
I get them
true.
both.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Rachel and Erin, how are you guys doing? Rachel, what's new with you?
I'm doing well. Today is All Saints Day.
That's right.
Which is lovely. And yeah, I don't know, just feeling pumped. I went to mass with my the community, like the academic community that I'm studying with right now.
Mm-hmm.
And the homily at mass, there was, or not the homily, it was I think it was in the Eucharistic prayers. There's something about Thanksgiving, like thanking God for this festival of the heavenly city. Something like that. And I was like, oh, that's so good. That was a really gross sound to make. And I'm like, oh, sorry, everybody.
It's a podcast about suffering. It's too bad.
It's going to be an ASMR episode. That's which is actually what I was thinking, because I'm literally pouring right now a Waterloo Fieldberry Radler. And so I was going to try and pour it close to the mic and see if you can hear anything.
Nothing. We heard nothing.
Zoom cuts it out. Yeah.
Well, it's probably because I poured it terribly, and now it's got a bunch of foamy head on the.
Yeah, you got a good head on it.
But here,
so Erin,
can you hear this?
No,
a little bit. I think there was like a tiny slurp,
Okay.
a little.
I was slurping a little bit. Yeah. Anyways, yeah.
Yeah. Erin, how are you doing?
I was telling these ladies just before we started, I am fibrocentral over here. So the fall is like a hard time for me. So the last couple of weeks, I've been a little bit like a walking zombie, partially. Like I'm okay until the midday hits, and then I need some brains.
Yeah.
But it's okay. It's not like unexpected. It's kind of expected, because it usually is a little bit in the fall, but I think every time when it comes around, I'm like, oh, I forgot how intense it gets,
Yeah. That is tough. You need to live in like Florida or something where it's always warm, maybe.
Yeah, I know, that would be nice. Yeah, I mean, that would be okay, but it's good. This is why it's so nice to have this podcast with you guys, because it's two beautiful faces that I love and that I get to see and make me happy, even if my body is
well, and rough. Also, yeah, and I think Erin too, like you have this beautiful. So if you've interacted with us on social media at all, you have interacted with Erin.
Yeah,
this is who you're interacting with.
That's it.
She is our social media complete presence, which is awesome. Amazing. And so and
it's hilarious.
You're welcome to. Actually, that's a good thing because we definitely have some listeners who are not followers on Instagram. So follow us on Instagram. We make funny reels. That's true. It's like
not
the little things.
It's Erin, and it's amazing. And it's amazing.
When we say we mean Erin.
Thanks, guys. Thanks, guys. but it is. You guys know what I mean. Like when it's
Yeah,
like
yeah.
when you're like for
Yeah.
you, Richard or Nicole, you guys are like either grading papers or doing papers.
Mostly writing.
And it's
papers,
like
yeah.
you're under it, like you're under the stuff. It's like
Mhm.
those little things that just bring you
Mhm.
so much joy. And making reels brings me so much joy, which is funny.
Aw,
Anyway, so
that's great.
it's
So
good. Yeah.
creative.
That's great. Thanks. Yeah,
How are you, Nicole?
I'm
Mm.
good. I am kind of pooped, It's
Mhm.
this time of year. We
Yeah.
just had like a little 2-day fall break a couple weeks ago.
Mm.
And now the students are kind of in the thick of it until basically American Thanksgiving,
Mm.
which as they call here Thanksgiving.
That's right.
So yeah, so I think, and just like students are stressed, and then
Yeah.
a lot of our plates too, teaching and grading and advising and stuff. So it's the whole
Yeah.
kind of mood right now. It's just everyone's a bit in the
Mhm.
trenches. So I think I'm
Yeah.
feeling that a little bit,
Yeah.
but at the same time, there's a lot of life. I really do love teaching. And just gotta keep going.
Just gotta
you know?
keep on
So
keeping on. That's
good.
funny though that you talk about Thanksgiving, because I did notice in our stats that actually more of our listeners now come from the US than they do from Canada.
Really interesting.
Yeah, I know,
Interesting.
right? And we're really not
Well-
related to any of you in the States. So that's, I mean, Rachel, a few people, but
Unless you're like a Cajun in New Orleans, then you
Right.
might be my cousin.
okay, awesome. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, that's cool.
That's good. Yeah. Yeah.
Except
Wow.
very distantly. Anyway. Okay, so yes, today we wanted to talk about disappointment, and it's, to be perfectly honest, we knew we were going to record an episode today, but we had not decided on a topic, and our secret prayer warrior suggested this topic, and all of us were like, oh yeah, I can relate to that, like for sure.
That's right.
And and it's such a universal experience, obviously, right? It's something we all go through. So
Mhm.
we thought, let's just talk about this. So we'll dive right in. I want to ask you guys, Erin, we'll start with you.
Sure.
What have been your experiences of disappointment? Maybe you've got like one thing that happened and you can remember it's really disappointment, or maybe it's sort of changed throughout your life. How have you experienced this particular emotion?
Yes, this is even when we were first talking about it, like when she first brought up the topic, I was like, ooh, yes. And I can remember this one specific moment, which was, I mean, everybody has lots of disappointment in their life. But there was one time when I was in high school and I was doing like training to be a lifeguard, right? So I did like the bronze medallion, and then I was doing all the stuff for the bronze cross, and I was doing the time swim. And I have never been like super fast doing swimming. Like I swim now, it's whatever, but I'm not like a speed demon in the pool, I mean, I don't want to use the word demon. I'm not a speed angel in the pool. Anyways, I just thought of that because I was at a baby shower thing like last weekend, and somebody brought deviled eggs, but they called them angeled eggs or something. Anyways,
Cute.
I know, I gotta kick it out. So anyway, so in high school, I was doing the thing, and then I was doing like the time swim, and it was like everybody was done before me, and everybody was kind of like, they're like, okay, keep going, you're almost there, whatever. And I totally failed by like probably 2 laps it would have taken me to get under the time. And it was that feeling of like I think I never even expected it not to happen. And so it was like all of these plans that I had made in my head about how things were going to go, or like working at the pool, or like, it's like, it's not even the moment itself necessarily, although that disappointment was there, but it was like more related to all of the things that were contingent upon that particular thing happening. And I think the reason why I remember that moment is because I remember my mom saying to me, she's like, God lets everything happen for a reason. There's going to be something better. And then like 2 weeks later, I ended up getting a job in the kitchen at the hospital in Yarmouth. And it was one of the best jobs I've ever had in my life. I loved that job, and the pay was like awesome. And it was pretty much the best job in town. So I really did believe that, it was like a very experiential thing about the Lord providing, but I still remember that feeling of like, of just like being totally let down and things,
Yeah. Like
Yeah.
gutted.
How about you, Rach?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of different experiences, but I think so. One major one, which I've spoken about before, is I'm in my 30s and I'm not in my vocation yet. And that's disappointing. And it was like not something that I mean, like it's now something that I'm disappointed, but I'm living and I'm living in a much less kind of intense, like it's less, the disappointment is less intense because it's been for a while the case. But I think I remember like when I was approaching my 29th birthday and I like knew it's like, I'm not like in a relationship right now that's heading towards marriage and like marriage isn't happening. And it was like so weird to kind of, because the finality of the thing of like, you just have a way. It wasn't like I've said this before. It wasn't like I was ever like, oh, I really need to get married at this time and have this amount of kids, or like, I never really thought like that. I just kind of assumed that it would happen. I just assumed like either I'd get married or I'd go into religious life. Like God would just make it very clear, like definitely before I'm 30. Like I definitely thought that. And I just assumed it. I don't think I really gave it much thought. I wasn't really worried about it at all. And there's a way in which I just was kind of like very free in that assumption. There was kind of a way in which I really trusted, like, you know, it seems normal to be in your vocation by the time you're 30. It doesn't seem like a crazy like expectation. So I think like when I was approaching 30 and I was like, wait a second, I don't think this is gonna happen. It was really it was kind of like a very big thing to sort of be like, okay, like I just thought it was, but it isn't. So what does that mean? Or like, you know, it just it was a disappointment that sort of happened to me. I didn't like have these great expectations very cognizantly. And then like, it was like crash and burn. It was just sort of like, I had this assumption, it wasn't even expectations, like an assumption. And then it was sort of this like slow dawning of like, oh, like I assumed wrong. And then like kind of becoming acquainted with the pain of being disappointed when I didn't really expect to be disappointed in a certain sense. Cause I will say too, when I was approaching my 30th birthday or my 29th, 30th birthday, and I think I was sort of like, why can't I just be okay with this? Like, what's the big deal? Like, you know, so I wasn't really one of those people that was like, yeah, I should be disappointed about this. I was just like, I don't understand why I'm disappointed about, like, you know, it's just sort of like, this is my life. Like, why can't I just accept that? And so it was interesting because that became like a gateway for me to really understand, what does it mean to have desires? Like, what does it mean to give your desires to the Lord? What does it mean that he doesn't answer your desires in the way you plan on, or you hope he will? Because I wasn't really actively engaged in those questions. It was just sort of these assumptions. So interesting. Disappointment was like a big teacher, and is, I would say, a big teacher to me of like how to relate to the Lord. And also trust him, how to trust him, because I will say now, and not just that, like many other minor experiences of disappointment kind of leave you a little bit like sometimes fearful. Like after you've been disappointed a bunch, you're kind of like afraid to now have expectations.
Right.
Yeah.
At all. You're like, I don't know, like it's probably not going to happen. And like, and you don't want to have that kind of crushing experience of grief in something that you were hoping for. So yeah,
it's tough, right? Man, I think there's a lot here. If I think about one of the times I was most disappointed and felt like let down by God, I think it was also related to vocation. And it was after kind of my first more serious dating relationship didn't work out. And I was I had like, kind of like you say, Rachel, I had all these assumptions about like, oh, I'm going to meet someone and there's going to be this type of person and things are going to work out like this. And it's, I'll get married by this time in my life. And this, you know, all of these things that you just think will happen. And I thought that that's what was going to happen in my life. And then all of a sudden it was just all false and all falling apart. And I was like confused and it was like I thought, I was like, Lord, I trusted you. Like I was trying to do all the right things. And I thought I was on the right path here. And I trusted you. And now I don't even know what's going on anymore, you know? And just that feeling of disappointment. And I guess I'm wondering what you guys think about the relationship between, okay, so there's that, the setup for disappointment is like, assumptions about what your life is going to be, or expectations, plans, right? Like, and you were working towards a certain plan of what your job was
Yeah.
going to be, and the preparation and all of these things. And like desires, like what we really desire, like the relationship between those things and disappointment. And then also like, where does hope come in? Because I think hope is a different thing, you know? So I don't know if there's something that we think about that kind of language that we use. Like, I'm disappointed because it didn't meet my expectations or didn't meet my hopes.
Yeah.
What comes to mind for you guys?
I feel like it's very much different for me anyways. My experience is very much different from that time, because that time in high school, I really didn't have a relationship with the Lord. I only had a conversion when I was in my early like 20s. Right. So it was kind of like
swimming like that.
Yeah. When I was swimming and doing and all of that, like, so it was like the disappointment then, like, even though my mom talked about God and I believed in God and all those kind of things, it was more of like, I thought this was going to happen. Okay. Now I have to do something else and I have to so it was like, my life was still in my hands. Like, I was actually like, I believed that it was, even though I know we all know better about our lives now. But then I had this experience of conversion, like really deep conversion, and kind of been growing in the relationship with the Lord now for a long time. But I found that it's actually harder in some senses to have that experience in time. Like, when you give, like for me, giving my life to the Lord and being like, okay, so now everything is going to be awesome, even though you know in your head that's so stupid and it's not going to be awesome because we live in a fallen world. I'm an idiot. Other people are idiots. Like, you know, but so it's like weird. So then this disappointment comes and it's almost like surprising. And, you know, like it catches me off guard a lot. And I actually was praying about this last week, I think, even because I was really noticing like how often my peace is affected by circumstances. And I'm like, oh, that's like interesting to me, you know? So it's like, if I have, I was praying about it because I feel like I've been having this kind of recurring thing in the last few years of feeling like God is pulling the rug out from under me.
Yeah.
Like feeling like I'm getting set up for something good. And it seems like it's being brought about by God. Like, he's encouraging it. He's like bringing me into it. And then I get into it. I'm like excited. I'm there. I'm absorbing it all. And then the rug is just pulled. And it's like, I'm flat on my face and just in pain, you know, and then feeling like, what the heck, Lord? Like, why? Except for I use a little bit more flowery language at that point. But like, yeah, but it's that thing. And so I think like praying with that, like I'm feeling like you're pulling the rug out from underneath me, but I know in some ways that that's not true because you only desire my good. However that comes about. Like, I know that both of like, so both of those things are there, but then thinking about that, like, peace, I'm like, oh, I'm just attached to way more than I thought I was attached to. Like, that's been the realization for me, you know? And so that's for me where hope has come a little bit more in, is like, oh, okay, so it's like believing that God is the Father that he says he is, then that's like the, you know, that kind of, then the circumstances they still affect me a lot, but at least I can see a little bit more clearly how they are affecting me and give that more intentionally to him. So I'm like in progress in that area, you know?
Yeah. I think there's something to that, like, when we're in a relationship with God and we know we're taught, we experience the goodness of God. We know that God wants good things for us. And it is confusing when things don't happen the way that we desire, right? Because it's that perennial, it's the classic thing of, well, God is good. Why does he let these bad things happen? I'm disappointed. This is not what I expected. And so it's, you know, reconciling with the fact that we're in a fallen world and that, you know, stuff happens. And yet there is still, and I think one of the challenges that I find is like, to continue to hope, because one option, when you realize, well, sometimes things just don't work out the way that we want, or whatever it is, I think of my example, and now, of course, I I'm married to this wonderful man who is different sort of from the idea that I thought that I needed in my head, because I realized I didn't really know what I needed. And the Lord knew much better than I did. And so made sure that that's who I got. Right. And so praise God for that. But when we're in those moments and we're thinking like, oh, well, I wanted this and I feel like I need this and that, and I'm not getting it and I'm disappointed, to just be like, well, I don't care. It's fine. I'm actually fine. Like, it's fine.
Like,
like,
I don't really need it, really, I guess.
I don't need it. Like,
yeah.
or like times where even like, Rachel was talking about being single. Like I was single for a long time too. And coming to a point where, like, you know what? I'm totally fine being single.
Yeah.
Like it's really fine. It's fine. It's fine. I'm fine. Everything's fine. Right. And it's not letting ourselves be vulnerable. There's a line from a Foy Vance song called Two Shades of Hope, where the line is, hope deals the hardest blows. He's like, it's not that despair is the all-time low, baby. Hope deals the hardest blows, right? And it's just that, like that, like hope is
you've much farther to fall when
you're allowing yourself
hoped in
to
something.
hope, right?
But
and it's like, I think it's part of it is learning to recognize that we're not hoping for maybe a specific practical outcome, although sometimes we can have those desires, but our hope is not an outcome, but our hope is in a person, in Jesus, and in hope in that of what he will do that's good, that may be beyond what we can conceive of. That would be the good thing we want. But which means that we don't know what we're hoping for. And I think that's challenging.
Right. Yeah.
I mean, Pope Emeritus Benedict wrote about this really beautifully in like the encyclical
Spe Salvi?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And he talks about hope like it's in something as yet like we haven't yet received, and yet we are there already. Like it's kind of both this weird. So it's like, yeah, it's hoping in something we don't know, and yet we kind of do because we know Christ, So it's like, it's sort of this. So really is a radical kind of surrender to the person of Christ, like to God himself. But I hear what you're saying, Nicole, because I think for me, I definitely was that person for like a long, I was like, well, I'm fine, totally fine, and then God was like, you're not fine. And
yeah.
Great. Yeah. Okay. And it was actually, because some people have a different tendency, right? Of like, it's so you have to know yourself well, I think, to kind of understand how this is all operating in your life, or like start to reflect on yourself. Because some people have the tendency to wallow, where they're like, I'm not fine, nothing's fine, everything's like over, but that's not my tendency. My tendency is like yours, Nicole, be like, I'm fine, it's fine, I'm just gonna keep what's fine, and
I can deal. Yeah
exactly. And God just like humbled me and like making me see. It's almost like he was like shining a flashlight, like drawing a box around it, arrows, everything. It's like, you're not fine, you need to accept this. And it was very humbling, but also it was really beautiful, because this is like, this is something I've been through in the last few years. And I've been talking, actually, it's funny, I've had these conversations with friends and family this week about this exact thing. But it's been like kind of, accepting my humanity, because he made me as a human being with like human desires and like human needs, and just accepting that I'm not God. I am not, and I have these needs. But then also, having the freedom to give him that desire and entrust that desire to him. And then for me, the thing that helps me to hope is actually the cross, which I think we've talked about this in other episodes before, because I always think about it this way, because sometimes, even if you look at the world, right, you look at suffering in the world, like you're talking, Nicole, about this is just the problem of evil in a certain sense. You're like, what the heck? Like this, and evil is kind of absurd. It sort of doesn't make sense. It by its very nature, it doesn't make sense. So it's like, you're looking at poverty, and you're looking at like abuse and all this stuff, and you're like, why? Like, why do vulnerable people experience this, or people are born into these things, and there's no direct answers to these questions. But then there's this like sense of, okay, I'm not going to diminish the problem, be like, well, it's fine. But I'm also going to just go the route of Job and just like trust that God sees all and like loves us. And then for me, the way that I can do that is the cross, because when I look at the cross, I think he gave everything for me, and then I think like, if I'm so precious, and each one of us are this precious to the Lord, if I'm that precious to him that he would shed his blood, like he would literally die for me. Like if, and I think I've said this before, like if someone dies for you, like they're so precious. You would not want anything to touch that person. You know, if you die for
Mhm.
something, you're not going to let it just kind of get trampled on by something else. Like
Mm.
you would protect that. So then I always think like, okay, Jesus like died for me. So if he's allowing things in my life, like they must be in some way for my good. I
Yeah.
can't really see it, and I can't justify it completely because he doesn't want me. He also doesn't want our suffering and pain. That's not a thing that God like delights in or wants for
Right.
us.
Yeah.
But we do live.
But he will use it.
But he'll
Yeah.
use
He
it.
will
Yeah.
use it. And and
Yeah.
it's not
Yeah.
heaven. We're not in heaven yet.
Yeah.
So
yeah. But it
Mhm.
is like, you say, I think like all like an experience already of heaven in some senses,
Right.
because so it's funny that you bring up Job, because I was just thinking about that even before you brought it up, because I was doing a talk last week. If anybody's interested, it was on suffering and hope at Holy Redeemer Parish in Canada. So you can look them up on Facebook or YouTube and check it out if you're really suffering and you want a little laugh. Actually, it's not a very funny talk, so don't get your hopes up. But anyways, but that was like the whole thing. Like one of the things that I started out talking about was exactly what Job says. Like the Lord gives and the Lord takes away. Blessed be the name of the Lord.
Yeah.
And how it's
Yeah.
like it's easy to say that for I don't know, like you lose a book, then who cares, you know? But as the stakes get progressively higher, it's like a loved one
Mhm.
dies. The Lord gives and the Lord takes away. Blessed be the name of the Lord. There's a natural disaster and tons of lives are lost, including people that you know and love. The Lord gives and the Lord takes away. Blessed be the name of the Lord. There's a child in the hospital that you know and love who is suffering and is totally innocent and like and
Mhm.
is in pain. And the Lord gives and the Lord takes away. Blessed be. It's like you can't even utter those words
Yeah.
in such a
Mhm.
circumstance, you know. But it's so
Mhm.
interesting how like the God's answer to Job in that is not an explanation.
Nope.
Like
Yeah.
God is basically saying like I can't even explain to you because you don't have my ability to see. You don't have
Yeah.
my ability to like know to
You weren't
conceive of it.
there.
You weren't
when
there
the-
when the heavens were made. You
Mhm.
weren't there.
Yeah.
It's like if God could, and God gives us his fullest vision in the person of Jesus Christ. Like, so exactly like you're saying, Rach, like in the person of Jesus Christ, like the resurrected Jesus, he retains his wounds. He has his wounds. So it's like he is telling us in his actual body that every cross is tied to a resurrection.
Mhm.
Every one of them,
Mhm.
like whether it's here or whether it's in heaven. So it's like we can touch that in some way when we're receiving Jesus at Mass or when we're like growing close to him or things like that, which is so like profound, but we are so dense.
Mhm.
Like,
But
I mean, I am for sure, you know, it's like like, you know, these things with the head, but then I find that it's so hard with the heart, and you don't want to just reject that and pretend it doesn't matter because in
Mhm.
like we're going to feel our pain, whether we actually feel it and process it or whether we repress
Yeah.
it and it comes back to bite us in the butt
Yeah.
at some point.
And that's exactly what was coming to mind too, is that like I think, you know, as much as we can talk about the importance of hope and trusting in the Lord and all of these things, and those things are all true and good,
Mhm.
and we're also humans, and we also, disappointment is like it's an emotion, and there's sadness
Right.
with that, and there can be anger, and it's a false dichotomy to say, well, you just have to kind of suck it up and trust the Lord and it's all going to be fine and have hope. You have to, I think it's also really important and healthy and to feel what you're feeling, right? I mean, you know, we have a beautiful example of Jesus who, when Lazarus died, he wept, right?
Yeah.
He knew that there was hope. He was about to rise him from the dead, and yet he goes through that loss of his friend, right? And so, yeah, to express it, like, I'm disappointed. Like, you know, Nathan and I, so we've been married for 3 months, and truly there's just so much grace, and we're very happy. Like we're so happy to be married. And with that, there's also just the realities of like, okay, yeah, right. We're two human, imperfect people. And we've been talking about, this concept of disappointment, and just being like, oh yeah, there's just different things where we're like things you expected or hoped or just had these assumptions of for the other person or for marriage that we're like, oh, we're not there yet. And, or, we don't have the same interest in this hobby or whatever it is that I wanted you to do this with me, but you actually are not on the same. Okay. And so we've been talking about the fact that we experience some like disappointment, and we had to allow ourselves to like express that and not take offense at that. If like, we're both feeling, we have these disappointments, be like, yeah, this is just, okay, this is real. And then like, okay, what are we going to do now?
Yeah.
And I think that's been like, it's been a humbling, we're still in this sort of humbling journey. And as much as it's really wonderful and there's really beautiful in it, but it's really real and difficult too. But I think it just is important to allow yourself to feel that. And that in itself is a gift too.
And and that the Lord can handle that from us, like,
Yes.
we don't have to like we've talked about this so much in different ways in lots of episodes. We don't have to clean ourselves up to go before the Lord. Like, we have to go before him. He will clean us up, or even just like those experiences, like you were saying, scripture says Jesus wept, like he's showing us that he gets it. And I think that for me has been one of the deepest consolations of experiences of disappointment, has been like, God actually knows, like he actually understands what I'm going through, because he went through it. Like, he chose to go through it with me, so that in this moment when I'm going through it, I am truly not alone. Like, he really is profoundly with me. And and that doesn't take away the pain or the disappointment, but you just, because I think it's important also to realize, like, we need to express our emotions so that so our emotions don't like twist us up, and like distort us and make us into these like kind of people who are closed in on themselves and just like racked by pain in such a way that we can no longer love, we can no longer experience joy. Because the other thing is, although there is disappointment, there's also opportunity for joy still in our lives many times. Like, maybe once in a while, maybe it's like a glimpse, or like here and there, but God gives us those experiences. So it's like for peace and joy and like the fruits of the Spirit, but it's not this sort of like namby-pamby, like, nice stuff. It's like deep and real.
Exactly.
I would, there were some periods in my life that I would say were some of the most difficult, kind of when I was in my 20s and struggling with a job that had a lot of just difficult sort of interpersonal things and company culture stuff. And I remember, but I was staying with the job because I felt called to, but everyone else around me was like, just quit. Like, this is not healthy for you, just quit. But I was like, I just feel like I can't. So I felt very alone in that time. And there was just this feeling, and this is maybe not quite disappointment, but it's, just feeling low, feeling down, feeling uncertain of where I'm going and all this stuff. But I remember I would come home in the evening and I would sit on the couch, and I just had this joy. I could not, there was literally no reason why I would have that joy. But it was like, I'm convinced, and it was one of the most faith enriching times where it was like the Lord was like right there with me. Like, no one else was with me. He was with me, and there was joy in that. And so I think allowing ourselves to feel our disappointment or feel whatever it is, but then allow the Lord to come into that with us. And like you're saying, see what he does in that, where you realize it's not just about this concrete thing that I hope for and desire, and that's a good desire and I want it, but what does the Lord have for me right now in the midst of this that he's doing, and he'll be with me. And that's something deeper and more profound. It's a deeper joy. And I remember when my sort of external life got easier and happier, I lost that sense of intimacy and deepness with the Lord. And I kind of like missed it, because it's so, it's unlike anything else, I think, that you can experience, right? That feeling of uniting, of being. So I think there's something that can be a gift in that too.
Exactly.
Totally.
Just that authenticity, because sometimes I think we fall into the trap of thinking that we're not good Christians if we feel these things. Like, you're not a good Christian if you feel disappointed. You're not a good Christian if you don't if you feel like you're having trouble trusting God. You're not a good Christian if whatever. And all of that is a lie. It's a lie, but it's 100% from the devil, because because I mean, that's his whole, like, to try and like take our focus off of, because then our focus really is off of God. Like
Yeah.
it's off of God and what God's doing, and it's onto us and how we're not good and how
Yeah,
we're,
that's
you know, like,
Mhm.
which is like this weird form of pride, which is, I mean, what pride is the
It
root of
is.
all, like,
It's so
Right.
sneaky.
you know, it's so
Yeah.
sneaky and it can be so
Mhm.
insidious. And like, so I remember this story
Sneaky
about,
pride.
yeah, I know. I remember this one. I was at like a family camp, Catholic family camp one time, and I was like talking to this woman who was I think she had 9 kids or something like that, and she had a van, and the van had broken down. And the way she was talking about it, she's like, "Well, if that's what God wants to do with His van, then fine." And I was like, "Woo!" But it's that sentence there was like one of those ones where it could either be coming from this place of, with her, it was totally authentic. You could tell that it was just like,
Mm.
you know,
It almost sounds like that's her prayer, where she's like, "Okay, Lord, like,
yeah,
it's your van, so you better fix it too," you know,
That's
like
right,
something,
yeah.
you know?
But it's like, even we cut ourselves off from opportunities of communion with other people sometimes when we're not able to authentically express, like when we just say, well, the Lord is just dealing with it, you know, like where if there's like false piety or pride there, that's, you know, where we're not actually feeling our feelings actually become a way of communion with other people, like in, you know, in a really beautiful way.
There's this experience that I've been having lately, and I've been like, I have a baby nephew who's just 6 months, and then I live with this beautiful family here, and they have 2 lovely little kids. And then I've just been encountering like lots of little children, like little ones all over the place. And one thing that I've been learning is like little people, like they just cry when they're sad. They just literally like, they just let it out, you know? And there's something so beautiful and free about that. And I was like, but then literally like in 5 minutes, if you give them a hug, or you kind of, and then they could be laughing and like, you know, and obviously that they're, you know, grow into adults for a reason. I'm not saying
sure. Yes.
But,
right.
you know, the whole idea of being childlike before the Lord, I think is like this sense of, which is now kind of going back to what you said earlier, Nicole, which is now giving me the freedom to express my desires to Him, and not like, you know, censor what, like censor the inner kind of working heart, like when I'm talking to God, and I just kind of am like, well, this is what I want, like this is what I, you know, and this made me mad and this made me sad, and there's kind of a beautiful way in which we can just enter into this kind of free like communication with Jesus, where, you know, like a child is just with their parents, like they're not sort of analyzing their own experience. They're just sort of sharing that experience like immediately with their parents. And I think the way in which like that's a beautiful image for us to be like, Lord, I'm struggling, but I'm, you know, but then in that conversation, which goes back to Job, and I think maybe we've talked about this before too, but like I love this, like Job, the whole book is a conversation. Like it's Job and God talking. That's the entire book.
And his
and
like
his friends.
Yeah,
and
like,
his friends. Right.
And his wife, who says, curse God and die.
Right. No, you're right. There's other stuff in the book. But like a lot of the book is him talking
that
to
line
God.
kills me. I'm like, curse God and die. Well,
she's very practical.
very practical. Yep. Just curse God and die.
That's a way for you. Yeah. But yeah, no, I mean, but I love that. The main kind of substance of the book of Job is just this conversation. It's kind of this thing, which I feel like I've experienced with God, just keep talking to me, you know, just stay in conversation. And so I think when we're disappointed, like that can be an sort of an achievable thing, or like something practical that we can really commit to, just like keep talking to God and authentically, like you said, Erin, like if it's anger, then
because it'll either be one or the other, right? It'll either be something that closes us off to Him, or it will be something that opens us up to Him. Like usually that whenever there's something that's really difficult, that it's usually one or the other that is kind of the movement of our heart. That happens. Exactly. So it does take, I think, some intentional like choosing of like, okay, Lord, I want this, please, not to close my heart off to you, and just to ask Him for that grace, you know?
Yeah. That's so true.
And
I think,
sorry, no, you go.
Oh no, I was just to add to that. No, I think that's so important, like to bring these things to the Lord. I think something that I've noticed in myself is that it was hard for me to know that I was disappointed. I just felt emotional about things.
Right.
I actually talked to, for me, it was like therapists or or good friends to be like, I'm feeling this, and I'm realizing like I remember, I think it was actually the therapist who named it for me one time. She's like, it sounds like you're feeling some disappointment. And it was like the tears came and I recognized, yeah, that's exactly what it is. Right.
Yeah.
I think it's sometimes hard it's almost, it's sort of an embarrassing emotion. I think.
That is so true. That's such a good point. Yes.
Because it means
You
that
feel like
we
chump.
failed.
It's like
or something.
which is so funny because so often it has nothing to do with anything that we could have controlled or
Right.
do. But
Exactly.
it doesn't happen, and it's like we feel like a fail. There's like shame that's associated with it.
Yeah.
Or you
But when
feel
you
just like an
name it,
idiot.
it's-
Mm.
Yeah,
I
you
hoped
feel like
in
an
this
idiot.
thing, and then why did I even hope?
Why didn't I know better? Why
Yeah,
did I
exactly.
like?
Mhm.
Yeah.
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 But I think once you name it, and sometimes I think that the community is important for that and support, then it loses its power, right?
Mhm.
Because when disappointment is hidden under layers of anger and sadness and other emotions, it still has its effect. It kind of has its hold on you when you're just like, oh yeah, I'm disappointed, and yeah, I am disappointed. I wanted this and it didn't happen. I'm disappointed. Then you're like, okay,
Cool,
all right,
yeah.
and then you can kind of take the next step, right? But so talking to God, talking to people, I think is helpful.
That's such a good insight though, Nicole. I'm just like reflecting on what you said, because I think it's also tied into, there's a way in which, and this is not for everybody, but I've never thought about this before. Some expectations or assumptions or hopes just are kind of tied into your success in the world. Like,
right.
like, oh,
Right.
I thought I was going to be here, or I was going to be in this situation, or this was going to work out. And then, you feel like an idiot also because you're like, well, everybody works. Sometimes it like works out for everybody else. Like it didn't work out for me. Or
I
like,
thought I would have 2 functioning legs when I was 42, but I mean, here we are,
right.
Yeah.
Exactly. So then it's like,
Yeah.
you sort of feel ashamed because there's some way in which you feel like your life doesn't measure up to
Yeah.
what
Right.
it should have been. And then there's like a kind of a humility that when you're like, oh, I'm disappointed, but also like there's kind of a little bit of pride in here. And it's not like, to go beat yourself up about, but it's like just to sort of like, okay, I'm going to let God take that out, like, sort of like purify me, or just like, just kind of, I don't know, bring me to a new place of freedom, because it's like, my life isn't defined by, and this is the other thing, my life is not defined by my disappointment.
Yeah.
My life is defined by my relationship with the Lord who loves me. And then I was thinking today's All Saints Day, and like, it's so epic to think about like running the race, and then really this is running the race. Like it's disappointment's a part of it. And I mean, St. Paul obviously knew what he's talking about, but the analogy of running is so amazing because you cramp up and you have like, you get stitches and it's like, it's not pretty. It's not like
you're sweaty, you stink, you're just
like even at
tired
the
after.
Olympic level, like these people have like, like the perfect physique, but when they're in that long distance run, you're like, that person's face is like tomato red. You know what I mean? It's like really messy to be running, but that's what we're all doing. So it's like, ain't no shame in that,
Yeah, it's true.
Good. Well, ladies, I know we have to wrap it up, but any final thoughts on disappointment? How to deal?
No final thoughts, but if you are sweaty, please don't hug me.
All right. Well,
I don't like sweat.
That's good to know.
That's fair.
Well, Erin, I'll tell you.
I've been cycling to work. We're just going to get totally off topic now, but that's fine. I've been cycling to work a few days a week, which has been awesome for my like mental health and just as a way of getting in exercise. But I was thinking today, I got to work today and I was like, ooh, I need to invest in some better deodorant. So I'm not like that, like stinky prof, know?
Right.
And like, I haven't like asked my students, oh, sorry, am I stinky? Cause like, obviously, but I'm just aware.
Sure. Yeah,
Anyway.
that's
Step
right.
one.
That's okay.
Step
I had a
one,
professor in
awareness.
university who didn't wear shoes ever, unless it was the winter and there was like a lot of snow on the ground. And then he would come in his boots with no socks and then take his boots off and walk around in the classroom with no shoes.
Oh, wow.
He taught
Okay.
philosophy. So I'm not saying
I'm
anything about
just-
philosophers. I'm just
Okay.
there's a
I'm not,
shout
like,
out to your
shocked.
brother-in-law, Rach. I know.
No.
Rachel's
Yeah, he would
brother-in-law
never
is a
do that, though.
philosophy. Yeah, no, he would not
He
do
would
that.
never be
but,
caught
Not a
dead doing that.
shoeless.
but he
No,
understands the eccentricities of philosophers.
Yes, I
so,
think
yeah.
that probably
Yeah.
is right.
I think that's one of the joys of being a professor, though. At least this is what I tell myself. I'm not,
Right.
well, even if my outfit is kind of weird and not that fashionable, it's okay because I'm a professor. I'm supposed to be eccentric.
That's right. Exactly.
It's
You're
all
supposed to be
good.
quirky in some way. That's exactly
Yeah.
right. Yeah. Yeah.
So
Okay, listen, you have a God wink for us this week, right?
I do have a God wink.
I'm
Okay.
excited.
So it's funny, it kind of ties back to a little bit of what I was talking about disappointment. So I remember one dating relationship I had in the past where we got to our 6-month dating anniversary, and it was the longest I'd ever dated someone. And I was like hoping we would like do something or celebrate it in some way. And there was nothing. There was no kind of like, he was not on the same page and not thinking about that at all. And I just remember being so disappointed and so sad and all these things, just feeling hurt and not saying anything because like, you're gonna. So now I'm married to Nathan, who has basically celebrated every month anniversary since we started dating. Because that's just the way he is. So almost our first date was on like the 1st of December, 2019. Almost every first of the month, he would like either get me flowers or he would celebrate in some way, or he'd make me dinner. And so yesterday or 2 days ago, October 30th was 3 months since we got married. And so he was like, he was planning, he's like, well, Sunday is October 30th. So we have to celebrate because it's our 3-month anniversary. And I was like, oh, okay, sure. He's like, yeah. So like, I'm going to buy a steak and I'm going to grill the steak and I'm going to make you like a nice dinner.
That's cute.
And so that's what he made me, this amazing dinner. And he just
That's so
every
awesome.
time he's just like, is this amazing? We've been married for 3 months. And he's just and it's just like,
That's so
I'm
cute.
like, wow, Lord, like the Lord took that disappointment.
he
He's like,
knew.
all right, I'm going to celebrate you every month now because you're a man who celebrates every month. And so that was my
beautiful.
little,
I
I was
love
thinking about it
that.
and I'm like, oh yeah, this is like an ongoing God wink for me.
That's right.
It's
Yeah.
lovely.
And just
That's
so, because
awesome.
you'll have to show us at some point, I made, so for all those who are listening, I made a plate for Nicole and Nathan for their wedding, like a serving platter. And it's got like the logo a little bit ish of In the Thicket. Cause really if Nicole's involved, then Nathan's involved. So anyways, so the plate has been sitting in Ottawa for forever, but Nicole's sister came to visit her other sister who's in Ottawa, who is Catherine, who was on a few episodes ago. And so Anna
Who's
is the
now
other sister.
engaged to be married.
Yes, congratulations.
Yeah, she is.
Shout out to
Okay.
Catherine and Graham.
Oh,
yeah,
that's
that's right.
exciting. Congratulations, guys.
it is. Yeah. So
Okay, sorry.
Anna,
Yes.
so the other sister, Anna, took the plate. I wrapped it up. She put it in her luggage. She took it back to Winnipeg, and then we'll be going down to Nashville to visit
some point.
Nicole and Nathan at some point. So the plate is being
And
all
if
over.
anybody
Making its way.
followed that train of connections,
So you can show us. You
congratulations.
can show us the plate when it arrives safely to you.
I will.
That'll be fun.
I don't know when she's coming for sure.
It'll be like 2030.
We'll still be
And I'll get
going.
this plate and be like, what was this? Oh yeah, that podcast. Oh no, maybe we'll be in like
I
our
wonder what
500,000
2030 of podcasting would
I
be
know,
like.
right? Yeah.
Nothing.
It'll be like
Yeah.
holographic conversations or something.
Yeah.
That's
Or something.
terrifying. Good.
There's
Okay.
a little bit.
Anyway, okay, folks. Well, thank you for joining us for this episode on disappointment. I
Yes.
hope something was as
I hope it wasn't
resonant.
disappointing.
Yeah,
I hope exactly.
I hope you were disappointed, but if you were, that's okay. And you can just talk to someone about it and name it, and then bring it to the Lord. And
That's
it's
right.
fine.
This is our
Yeah.
trump card with this podcast because it's a podcast on suffering. Like, if we made you suffer, that's okay. Because that's
That's right.
so kind of the
Oh,
point. No.
man.
Yeah, because it can be redemptive. It's all
That's right,
redemptive.
that's right.
Okay. Good. Well, we look forward to talking to you again next week,
Yes.
everybody.
Thank you for joining
Bye,
us.
guys.
We love you, dear listeners.
Yes.
Have a good evening or morning or whatever, whenever you are.
God bless.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of In the Thicket. If you like what you hear, give us a rating and hit that subscribe button. We have new episodes every Monday with more stories and honest conversations about life when the going gets rough and the hope and humor amidst it all. We'd love for you to join our community on Instagram and Facebook at In the Thicket Podcast. While you're there, let us know how we can pray for you. God bless and see you next week.